Welcome to Back from the Abyss. I'm Dr. Craig Heacock. Chris and I have been greatly enjoying and getting a lot out of the emails and messages that you've been sending us. And today I wanted to share a couple episode ideas that folks have sent us that I think are actually really great. One person wrote in and said, I've always been curious about identifying and treating mental illness early on. There's little literature I can find about this. What might you notice in your child from a very early age? Yeah, I actually have a couple episodes planned over the next few months where parents are going to talk about the signs and early stages of their child's prodromal or early illness, how that developed, and also some wisdom and thoughts for parents and families who might be dealing with that kind of thing. Another excellent idea we got from a listener is this. My episode suggestion is a story that explores how psychiatric disorders affect families and intimate relationships. Maybe a future episode might include a couple that explains how they deal with mental illness in their relationship. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and we're definitely going to explore that here in the next few months. So thank you for those two ideas, listeners. And again, we really enjoy getting emails, what you like about Back from the Abyss, suggestions for stories, creative but kind criticism, anything that you'd like to share with us. And you can do that through the BFT website, bftapodcast.com, or through my website, craigheacockmd.com. In this story, Annie tells her journey of starting off as a happy, carefree child until the tragic suicide of her mentally ill father when she was 9 years old, to then pretending for years that she was just fine by overachieving and smiling and reassuring others, but all that time falling deeply and secretly into the two loves of her life, alcohol and cutting. For a time, these extremely powerful coping strategies worked for her until they didn't, and she then had to do the hard work of therapy to find a new way to live. Today, Annie is a clinical psychologist, and she uses that well of darkness and healing to share her compassion, wisdom, and hope with others. A note about the word dysregulation. Annie uses this word frequently, both to describe her inability to regulate her mood states, as well as her powerlessness to avoid slipping into the numbed parasympathetic state that we call dissociation.
I knew my dad wasn't well. I mean, he just didn't seem happy, but I didn't really understand what was going on. And I remember going to see him in the hospital. He had attempted suicide, and I didn't really understand it because, he had a wound, and trying to understand what was wrong with him, I just didn't get it. And I remember people saying, well, your father is sick, and that I didn't understand that because he didn't look sick. He was still just my dad, and then eventually one night we couldn't find him. And I don't know why my sister and I were apart, but I got a call from her. I remember it was a big black rotary phone. I was on the phone and she just said, "Dad's dead." And I think I screamed, and he had died by suicide. And, I feel like right then my personality, my life, like the rug was pulled out from under me. Nothing made sense anymore. And he was just gone of this mysterious illness that was unnoticeable to me, or not understandable to me.
How old were you?
I was 9.
9.
Yeah.
Such a tender age.
Yeah. My mom told me that I kind of pretended it didn't happen. And, the day of the funeral, I was upstairs playing, and she came up and said, it's time to go to the funeral. And I said, I don't have anything to go to today, or something like that. And so I don't know if I was completely dissociated, but, just not present with what was happening. And yeah, I changed after that. I became an introvert. I don't know if that's possible. You just go right from extrovert to introvert. And, but it felt like I did. And just, I think that was the beginning of self-loathing. And it wasn't necessarily that I blamed myself. I remember I made him cry once, and that has still stuck with me, that I remember him crying and I don't remember what I did. And I remember just watching him from the stairs, crying in his chair. And so I know there was part of it that was like, what could I have done different? Or I think it was more, why couldn't I be good enough? Why wasn't I good enough? Why weren't we good enough? First he left us, and then he left the world. So after that, I was very good at school, and I put all my effort into school. I was super good at math, and came home and studied, and that was most of what I did. And I had friends and stuff, but there was this, darkness that was just there, a void. And it was partially just the loss and the grief, but partially this lack of understanding of why something like that happens.
So on the outside, maybe you looked okay. You're doing well in school. You're working hard, succeeding.
Yeah.
On the inside, what was happening?
I felt like I didn't know how much pain was there. I didn't understand it. And then, but I think starting at puberty, especially when there's hormones and emotional ups and downs, and I started to realize that I am just the consciousness of emptiness and sadness and not being like other kids, and just a darkness that was there. And so just kind of it felt since I was 9 like a slow death inside. I mean, that sounds very dramatic, but
no. But I was wondering, Annie, do you remember it as more of a numbness or more of a sadness? Because a lot of people who go through terrible traumas as a kid will say they didn't really feel anything except nothing.
I would say from 9 to about 12 or 13, it was numbness, because I don't remember much from that period of time. And I look back and I see some of the things that I did during that time. I don't remember them. I don't have like conscious memories from that period. It really wasn't until 12 or 13 that it became sadness. And what I later would learn, the term dysregulation, which is so perfect to describe my 12, 13-year-old self, is just not able to have emotions and just being so overcome by my emotions. Mm-hmm. I hated myself and hated every thought that I had and every emotion I had, every sensation that I had, and did anything I could to get out of my head. And honestly, it was a lot of self-protection of my family, or not protection of my family. Like I don't want them to see my sadness, because they'll, and I don't think that was conscious, but, emotions I knew were surrounded by pain for others. And so, I hid them and went to my room a lot and cried and I dealt with it myself because I didn't want them to have to deal with it.
Yeah. Was this about the time, now emerging adolescence, where you discovered self-harm?
It was. And that was a game changer for me. That I sometimes say that this is a dramatic thing too, but the two loves of my life were self-injury and alcohol. And this was the first one. And I remember when I discovered it, my sister had said something that upset me. And I started feeling bad about myself, and was just... that dysregulation is the best word I can think of. It is this like energy inside of pain and hatred and just not knowing what to do with it, and feeling I was going crazy and popping out of my skin. And I don't know why I grabbed a set of keys and I ran to the back of the yard. We had this giant yard, and sat kind of in a bush. And for some reason, I just started scratching myself with the keys kind of, and instantly I remember sitting there and thinking, I'm okay. I can do this. I'm okay now. It was a discharge that my thinking was different. I realized I have taken care of the problem, and I went back in and
You found control.
I did.
Yeah.
I went back in, put the keys on the counter, and I was okay. And then I started, thinking about it and, went to cutting. And it was my own little secret. Wasn't something, back then it wasn't something, in the 80s that people talked about then. I didn't know what self-injury was. I don't know if that was the term. I'm sure, it was, but not with me. And so I thought I had discovered this like weird secret thing that helped me function. And so when I would get upset, that's what I would do. And it would take care of the problem, and it would discharge the energy, the emotions. It would change how I'm thinking. And I would be able to go back again. That was always in my room or somewhere hidden, and then just go back out and be fine and be able to be a regular person. And it worked for a long time. I felt crazy was a word that started to come up for me because I knew it wasn't something other people seemed to do. At least I never saw other people have cuts or scars or things like that, and I always did it in places that people couldn't see. But that level of emotion and that behavior, I knew was weird.
Mm-hmm. What exactly did it do for adolescent you?
For me personally, I think there was definitely an aspect of punishment, of I've done something bad and this is the punishment, and then it's done. It's discharged. I took care of it. That's a term I always thought. I'm going to go take care of this. And so it was definitely an expression of self-hatred. So it was anger, but it was directed toward myself, and it was a way to discharge the anger, the rage, really. So it was letting something out. This is how bad you are, how bad this hurts. And it was, someone said once, I think I was in a college class, an outward manifestation of an inward spiritual state. And I don't even know what they were talking about. But when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like cutting. And I didn't want people to see it. I wanted, me to feel it, because then I could feel it when I was walking around. I could feel the scab and the scar, and, I knew I had taken care of things.
When do you think it began to get out of control? Because it sounds like maybe in those early months and years, it was something that you had some mastery over, and when you would get dysregulated, you had this strategy.
Mm-hmm.
But then it started to take on a life of its own and took control of you.
Oh, I think I successfully hid it, and it was a controlled behavior probably until I started drinking. And then it got out of control, and it became messier. And, I was a person who knew, I learned how to do it cleanly so that people wouldn't see any evidence. And it didn't work that way when I was super drunk, And so probably, 17-ish when I started, I was a late bloomer for drinking. And that's when it started getting out of control. And people started to, I'd make mistakes, I guess, is how it felt like. And people would see evidence of it. And the shame then became more severe because it wasn't just I'm crazy. It's like other people know I'm crazy.
So they coexisted. I mean, we've heard some people on this podcast talk about sort of switching from drugs to eating disorder to other compulsive behavior, self-harm, and almost like whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
But for you, maybe that's not the way it was. It was more the self-harm started, and then the alcohol came in, and then they fueled each other. Is that, or did they feel like they had a separate life of their own?
Yeah, I guess they fueled each other. The cutting just wasn't quite doing it as well as it used to, and I wanted more. And then the first time I drank alcohol and blacked out the first night I drank it and wanted to do it every day after that, I remember thinking, this is how people live. This is how they do it, is they drink, and thinking, oh, well, looks much better than the cutting. So that became the next love affair. So I think it was the next coping skill or control skill. And then they did fuel each other, because at some point, for a while, the drinking, and I wouldn't want to hurt myself. But then over time, when the depression stuck around, the cutting would get worse when I was drunk. Mm-hmm. And so then...
Did they serve different purposes for different kinds of dysregulation or different emotions? Or, was it more that it's more the magnitude, like maybe alcohol's the day in, day out love, but then you could always add self-harm on top of that?
I think alcohol was about trying... My goal was apathy. It was when I drank, I just didn't care about anything. I didn't care that I was crazy. I didn't care if I looked the way I did, just apathy. Like, who cares what people say or do or think of me, or what I say or do or think? It doesn't matter. And the cutting, I think, was more about anger. All the anger and rage that I had about my life, and it was about a discharge of anger.
Now, you've mentioned at least 3 times that you felt crazy, or that you thought you were crazy. And what do you mean by that? What kind of crazy were you self-labeling or believing?
I guess just not like other people, not normal. There's that component is I'm different from other people, and I don't fit. I don't fit in anywhere. I pretend I was like chameleon. I can be this way with this person, this way with this person, to look okay, to look like I fit. So part of it was knowing the secret, that the secret of the pain and the hatred inside of me and the behaviors that I was doing. And then, so that was part of the crazy. And then the other crazy is, and this is hard to explain, even now having much more language around it, and I still, it's that dysregulation. And what it is like a surge, like a wave of a lot of self-hatred and just feeling out of control, just feeling like nothing is okay. The world is awful. I'm awful. Everything about me is awful. I don't want to be here. I don't want to live. I just want to go in a hole. I just want to explode. That was a thing. It felt like I was going to explode, just at some point. I remember a therapist telling me, like, well, those feelings aren't going to kill you. And I was like, I'm not so sure about that.
It sounds like
I remember thinking, I was like, it felt so strong that felt like my heart would explode or something.
Was that your daily experience for years?
Yeah. And it was lower level, more like sadness, like a sadness and just a hopelessness. Hopelessness is like my go-to emotion. And then usually when something would, what I felt, demonstrate that I'm no good, that I would say something that hurt someone, or I would do something wrong, or I would see evidence that other people were more lovable, that's when the wave would come. And I had no control over that. I mean, I knew it was coming. I knew how it had to end, by taking care of it.
So, taking care of it was
cutting or
alcohol or cutting.
Yeah.
And was it the kind of thing that you're getting hit daily with these waves of just poison, self-loathing, emotional dysregulation? Just, as you said, you feel like it could kill you. Mm-hmm. Is it the kind of thing you're thinking, okay, what can I do right now? Can I drink? Can I cut? Can I
I
do
need
both?
something.
Something. Yeah.
Especially when I was into both at the same time. My ability to tolerate little frustrations or little things was just pretty nil. And so it was pretty common daily experience at that point, and hard to hide. It became harder and harder to hide the pain. And I started talking about pain to people. And I remember how uncomfortable people who got close to me would be around me. I mean, intense was always the word. They're like, Annie's intense. And
both of those behaviors really push people away.
They do.
I mean, heavy drinking, blackout drinking, and cutting, and cutting particularly with any kind of intimate partners. That's a hard thing to explain to your lover or partner why you're covered with scars.
Yeah, I always lied. I don't remember. Oh, I got myself shaving, which I actually thought was accurate, because if I was using a razor blade, I thought, well, that's kind of true. But I would come up with lies depending on what the most recent cut looked like. Just got adept at moving in a way that people didn't see stuff. And, I think I put makeup on the scars sometimes. And so I had the sense that I desperately wanted to be close to people and wanted people to see, to be present with me, and desperately wanted, to be loved and cared about. But yet I knew that what I was doing and the way I talked, it was mainly like the words. I said some very disturbing things about my desires to hurt myself to people who I cared about, especially when I was drunk. And that does not foster no one wants to hear that.
Yeah. Talking to the 19-year-old you, the 21-year-old you, if we had asked, hey, Annie, what would be harder to give up, cutting or alcohol?
I think because I drank more frequently at that time. I remember once it was Lent, and I said, I'm going to give up smoking for Lent. I was a smoker, and my friend's mom said, why don't you give up the alcohol? And my response was, wait, that's like giving up water. I can't, that it seemed inconceivable that I could give that up. But I don't know, though, the cutting, if I had to say you can never do that again, that would have been a pretty tough ask.
Because now you're sober from alcohol, how many years?
15,
yeah. And I want to talk in a few minutes about how that happened. But you said to me just even before when we met, and then before this recording, you said that cutting, self-harm is still something that's on the back burner. It's not happening. It hasn't happened in a while, but it's not gone.
Not entirely. No, it's, I had a therapist once who said, recovery from anything is that your terrible experiences get less frequent and less severe. And that's absolutely true. So for me, the wave feeling is less intense and less frequent. But when those happen, the thoughts that flash through my mind, the urges I have are all around causing myself some kind of pain or hurting myself in some way. And I don't really have a lot of, every once in a while I'll see someone doing shots or something and think like, oh, I remember that. But I don't have like a obsession about that or craving or urge but yeah, there's still a draw. I mean, I call myself 80% sane now. And
with the 20% is the part of you that would still, love to self-harm.
It's still there. And it doesn't feel like today, for example, I feel pretty sane. And I don't have a desire to do that. But, right now my sadness, hopelessness is, I call it PMH, premenstrual hopelessness, because I only get one symptom of PMS, and it's hopelessness. It's just abject hopelessness, and it comes for a couple days, and those waves come, and everything hurts again. And that's when I think about it. You know, I haven't acted on it in, to be honest, probably 2 years. And I haven't actually physically cut myself in much longer than that. But that's when it flashes as images.
Let's go back again and hear a little bit about how you went from years of dysregulation and self-loathing and hopelessness, and as you said, feeling like you could actually die from how horrible you felt, cutting and drinking yourself into blackout. What was the process therapeutically of starting to move towards some sort of ability to regulate, some kind of self-compassion?
Well, I started having bottoms. I had a bottom with cutting and some bottoms with alcohol. And I ended up, having a couple psych hospitalizations. And the funny thing about those is during those, they only talked about mental health, and no one ever asked me how much I drank. So I didn't even link the two. I didn't even think they were related. I thought alcohol was the solution and mental health was the problem. So until I got assigned to this one therapist, and she had me do these things called diary cards. And you had to rate, how much do you want to kill yourself today? It was every day. How much do you want to hurt yourself today? And how it had on there, how much do you drink? And so I always put, I thought I'd be honest. So I put 12 plus, and I gave them to her, and she said, "Is this 1 to 2 a day?" And I said, "No, that's 12. And she said, "Well, what's the plus?" And I said, "Well, that's about when I black out. So I'm not sure how many it is after that." She just put the card down and looked at me. I was already hooked with her. She was so awesome and so just amazing as a therapist. And she looked at me and she said, "I'm the wrong therapist if you're going to keep drinking like that." And I was just, no, please, anything but that. She got me, she was in Al-Anon, and she got me to go to a 12-step meeting. I somehow stayed sober for like 4.5 years after my first meeting. And that was the beginning of recovery. I realized that, drinking and drugs were part of the problem.
But in those early years of sobriety, did the dysregulation, self-loathing, cutting, did that all continued?
The cutting decreased, I think because, my inhibitions weren't down and my judgment was better, my insight was better. But the self-loathing, the sadness was still there. It was just this persistent sadness. I really didn't think I was powerless over alcohol. I thought alcohol was the solution that worked for a while, and it stopped working. But I
just needed to figure out a way to manage it.
Yeah, well, I knew my life had become unmanageable because of the drinking. But I really didn't think I was powerless. I thought what I'm powerless over is that I'm crazy. It still was there. And so ultimately, I drank again because I moved away from my supports and always that sadness won. When I relapsed, I was in graduate school, and I remember thinking, well, at the time I have a pretty good relationship. I'm a high functioning graduate student, and my mental health is pretty good. So alcohol shouldn't be a problem now. That was incorrect.
You did some field research.
I did for 2 years. Yeah.
What ended that? Your 2 years of seeing whether you could manage it, and did that?
That's a funny story, because when you said field research, I actually did research. So I was working in an alcohol research lab. So I took home a breathalyzer, and I would drink, and I would record like a diary card. Drink number 7. How much do I want to kill myself? How much do I want to hurt myself? How sad am I? and what's my BAC, you know? And I have a stack of journals, which I've looked at maybe once or twice, but you can hardly read them. And I call them my relapse journals. And, you know, it was just every night, blackout drinking at the time, in chat rooms on the internet. I knew after 9 drinks, I couldn't speak well on the phone. And so I would chat online. And then at a certain point, I couldn't even chat online. So I did actually research, and it just got more and more miserable. And the obsession about suicide was just so persistent and so painful. And then another bottom, I got in a car accident, and you know, the back half of my car was kind of turned sideways from the car that had hit me. And my first thought when I saw the police lights coming was, oh my gosh, they're going to smell alcohol, because had been drinking. And so I put a bunch of cough drops in my mouth, you know, and then it hit me, this is not okay. And my therapist said, you know, I think it's time to get some more help.
And did you quit as readily?
No. No. I would stalk 12-step meetings. So there was a clubhouse and a liquor store within a block from my house. I would drive around the clubhouse and be like, oh, that's where people go in. Okay. Because I knew I'd been in the 12-step meetings before, and I knew about it. And, you know, I stalked them. I didn't go in, and just it went on and on and on. Just the same, desperately wanting to get well, but not believing that was possible. Mm-hmm.
What do you think of AA and the 12-step model? What part or parts of it were most crucial for your healing and continued sobriety?
So I do think that 2 things are ultimately what saved my life. Besides, you know, overall, kind of, I do believe there's some kind of higher power that, you know, but like the physical things that saved my life, I think, are the 12 steps and DBT, Dialectical Behavior Therapy. And with the 12 steps, there's just, everyone has this like life lesson in it that I don't feel we don't get it taught, you know, that there's some things we are powerless over, but there's other things we aren't, and that we can't control the things that we're powerless over, and we have to focus on the things we can have power over. And if we come to believe that it's not just us that gets us well, it's something else. It's other people, it's love, it's the universe, you know, whatever. And, you know, just each of the steps, I think, got me closer to sanity. I just somehow in my history, I didn't learn those things because I was shut off. And, you know, I'm sure there were lessons, but I wasn't present for them.
Yeah. My sense is, if you go to 12-step meetings and you never get a sponsor, that's like going to the pizzeria and only having the, I don't know, chips.
Yeah.
Like soup. A Coke, soup. Because I work with a lot of people. I've been in meetings, and I mean, I always ask them, did you get a sponsor? Well, no. And I mean, what's your thought on that?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like without a sponsor, it's like doing therapy without therapists. I mean, maybe not quite, but
a bike race without a bike.
I need someone else, because as they say, my best thinking got me here. So, you know, I need something outside myself, and sometimes that's a sponsor, and sometimes that's the group, and you know, so. Yeah, I had to be just completely give in and say, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. I'll go to meetings. I'll get up early in the morning. I'll call you every day. I'll do all these things I hate doing if it's going to help. You know.
Yeah. Some listeners know about DBT, Dialectical Behavior Therapy, but I would guess the majority don't. Could you start, Annie, maybe describe a little what DBT is, and then in more detail how it really helped you transform the way you feel and function?
Sure. So in some ways similar to CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, because it affects, works on your cognitions, your thoughts, and your behaviors. But it was developed for people with borderline personality disorder or like chronic suicidal thoughts and urges and self-harm and stuff. So I wish I had those things. And so the first step in it is mindfulness. And I remember I was in a DBT group. That therapist I talked about, she was a DBT therapist. And so I was in a group, and the first group we did 1 minute of mindfulness, and everyone was like, "Oh, that was so relaxing." And I was like, "That was awful."
They were lying.
What?
All of them were.
Yeah. They asked how was that for you? And I was like, it was the worst minute of my life. Why would I want to be alone and present with my thoughts? That's what I'm trying to get away from. That's the, first part of that is being able to tolerate and have a way to be present in the world that is manageable. Like you learn kind of how to just be in the moment without, it's not like pushing away, it's just, for me, it was focusing on other things, instead of focusing on my thoughts, I would turn my focus to my breathing or something. And that was something I could grab onto. So as I learned how to do it, I could do it for 3 minutes and then 5 minutes. And the self-loathing was still there for a long time, but I was also able to do it. And then the other parts,
can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
Why do you think mindfulness is step one in DBT? Because you said you started with that and spent a lot of time
it's like
on
core mindfulness, they call it, because it's the core of everything. Because, part of things like DBT, or the difference between that and CBT, is that your instant goal is not to change everything. It's like, let's get where you are first and be able to be in the moment and accept. It's an acceptance piece, not resignation. I had to learn that difference. It's not like resigning, because I was really good at that. Like, oh, this is my life, and not resigned to it, but just being present with it and not being so reactive, not trying to change the moment right away, because the ways I changed the moment were self-destructive. And so this was just being in the moment, and that as the distance between like the negative thinking and the behavior, there's a few minutes in there. That's like where the power is, because that's where I can make a choice. Like, oh, I'm feeling anger and I want to do this desperately. And if I can just wait a minute or two, and it was miraculous. They're like, it will go away. And I was like, no, it's not gonna go away for like days. But as I got better at it, it's like, oh my gosh, like it's less, and
so even that sense of, you said, feeling like just poisoned with so much awfulness, emotional maelstrom, if you wrote it out and observed it, it would go away.
Yeah, with some other skills, I'm glad that that's not the only skill in the therapy. There's just stress tolerance that you do when you're in crisis. It's like when the dysregulation is at its tip and you're at that wave, which I was so glad to hear other people had that. That there's things you can do to just stay alive and stay safe.
Yeah, such as what's been most helpful for you?
Well, my favorite is distraction, as you might imagine. And that one is just, when you're at the tippy end, you just do anything you can besides drugs and cutting to distract yourself. Now, when I was learning this, we didn't have phone games. Now I use phone games for my distraction. But finding things that will discharge some of the emotion or just get you through, to keep you alive for 15 minutes or keep you safe for 15 minutes. And then self-soothing is another one, just doing something that feels good, something. And that was really hard to find at first, but that's why I was a big fan of holding ice cubes. Because if you hold them really tight, they start to burn. And I like that.
That felt good.
Yeah. And I misused the snapping, you snap a rubber band on your wrist, and I did that a little too much. So I was cut off from the snapping. But, something that is an intense sensation, a super hot shower, a super cold shower, something sensory that just pulls you along for a couple minutes and gets some distance between that wave of pain and behavior. Even just saying, okay, I won't hurt myself for 15 minutes. And there were times that 15 minutes later, I would then do it. But a lot of times I wouldn't.
I would imagine that process. So of learning self-soothing that's not drug, alcohol, or self-harm. So for you, it was a painful something or a shocking thing. But then I'm imagining that took quite a bit of time to actually transition to something that most people on the street would say, oh yeah, that's actually a soothing thing.
Yeah. So I had to say, is this ongoing self-injury or is this a coping skill? But, the hard thing is when you're coming off drugs and alcohol, nothing feels as good. And so it's like trying to find anything that is just, okay, it's not going to feel as good, but it'll get me through. And then over time, finding things, I no longer find ice cubes and snapping rubber bands and things like that soothing. So
yeah, what do you do now? Like when you have these regular bouts, the PMS hopelessness that comes with some unfortunate regularity, what do you do now to self-soothe?
I would say I do tend to use more distraction than self-soothing. I think of it as, just surviving it and putting off any destructive behavior. And not that that's like a big urge anymore. It's more just, okay, Annie, you can get through this, So it's like a little bit of self-soothing cognitively. And sometimes I can't do that. So if I can force myself to call someone, that's soothing. Get a massage, just even like massage lotion into my hands or something, it's like anything that feels good. And, a Netflix binge is, distraction, and they're fine. Those are fine. It's like, if I'm not using that every day to distract from my life, if I'm using it, well, I do watch Netflix a lot, but if the distraction and, it is kind of like a intentional avoidance, and it's okay if all you're trying to do is survive,
Yeah. We often think of, I think in mental health, we often think of DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, as associated with either borderline personality disorder or borderline traits or borderline personality structure. Where would you say you fit in on that? Because it sounds like you had the horrific emotional dysregulation and self-loathing, and you had a lot of the sort of checklist things, but...
Yeah. I remember when I first saw the criteria, someone sat down with me and said, this is what we think you have. And I felt an incredible sense of relief. I was like, oh, I'm not crazy. I'm just borderline. Then later I found out how people sometimes feel about that diagnosis. But
we had an earlier episode on this podcast where a woman talked about this very same thing, that there was actually great relief in seeing that this syndrome or personality disorder or personality structure is a thing.
Yes.
Because you're like, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not losing my mind. But this is actually something that many, many, many people struggle with. So for you, that was...
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I got the book, someone gave me the book, I think it's Lost in the Mirror. And it talked about, when you're borderline, you feel like XYZ. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Over time, so that was really soothing and really helpful at the time to look at that. But over time, as I got into recovery, when I look at those criteria now, they don't fit. And I've asked, my therapist, like, you think that's still there? And she said, no. And I said, well, I thought it was supposed to be like pervasive and lifelong, and it wasn't my whole life. And, I wasn't always like this. And it's, did I just get really good DBT and I learned when I relapsed that it came back, that I was pretty stable. Like I still had kind of a dysthymia when I was not drinking, but the unstable relationships and they were much, much less. The emptiness, the abandonment, they were still there, but much, much less. And then when I started drinking again, it was like, oh, it's back. So nowadays, when I look back, I'm like, there should be something like an alcohol-induced personality disorder. And
I think that's a thing.
Yeah,
I do.
Should be.
I do. I see that a lot of my addiction work, people come in and it's not just the addiction behaviors that are driving the family away, but it's personality disorder stuff. And then people go into recovery and that stuff goes away.
Oh, right. Yeah. And it looks the same. It looks like antisocial, narcissistic, it's like, then you get clean and sober and it might still be there. But I think for a lot of people, I know a lot of women who thought I was, borderline or histrionic or something. And now I think about the discomfort. People tell me now, it still kind of boggles my mind. They're like, you're so easy to be with. You're just so fun and light. And you're like sunshine when you walk in the room. That's so weird. It's still weird. But it's like, that is the opposite of how I felt and really was in the world, especially when I was drinking and not recovering. Mm-hmm.
So now you work as a clinical psychologist, and and I hear great things about you. And I'm curious how you use both what you learned in DBT and in 12-step, and how do those come into the room as you sit with people in terrible distress and people where you were years ago?
Well, I think the best thing, and I don't believe you have to have had a mental illness and an addiction to understand, but the one thing I do have, I think, is that I do believe I've visited the depth of darkness. I've had suicide attempts and I believe I got there. And so when I see people teetering on that edge or who've gotten there, I do think, there's a thing in 12-step programs. They say, no matter how far down the scale we've gone, we'll see how our experience can benefit others. And I used to think, like, how in the world could this help other people, this horrible pain? And I just know. And I think people know I know. I don't have to tell them anything. It's just I get it. I feel it. I can be in the room with it. And no matter how weird they're acting out in the world, and, I can sit with them with it and know and see, this might be helpful. This might be helpful. These basics. Most of the people I work with have mental health and addiction. And so I know that not everything that worked for me will work for that person, but I can feel the hope, and I don't ever lose hope. And now, at my job, it's like other people are like, why do you keep trying with that person? Like they're gone. They're not getting well. And I've just seen it in me and other people that there is no, I've seen people get back onto a life that feels like it's worth living. And I would say a life worth living sober, which was mind-boggling to me for a while. Like not just a life that I can live, but a life I can live sober and actually not feel crazy all the time. And, it's not all happiness, but I'm a person in the world and I know people can have some level of that experience and feel connection with another person. And I try to do that in session, in therapy. It's just, we're just here together and your pain's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
it's almost like a level of humility that, as you said, your colleagues might say, hey, this person's hopeless, they're not going to make it. And because of where you've been. And I think in my work, there's a number of people that I was sure they were going to die. And knock on wood, none of them have. In fact, some of the people that I was most sure were going to die are really thriving now.
Yep.
And a number of the people that of my 8 suicides, I'd say 7 of them I had no idea.
Yeah.
But that helps, I think, with some humility to think, who knows? And if we can pour some hope into people and just wait it out.
You just don't give up.
Yeah. I have a side question. It seems like you would be an expert in this. I'm imagining that there's some number of people listening today who know someone, a friend, a family member who's self-harming. And I think that revelation can scare parents and siblings. And I mean, do you have any thoughts or wisdom or guidance for people who know of someone that they care about that's self-harming? And is there anything they can do or say, or how should they understand that? Because I know many people have come to me like at dinner parties or just random places, and they hear I'm a psychiatrist, and they say, well, can I ask you something? And that's actually one of the things I get asked the most. Oh, I have a friend or family member who's self-harming.
It is hard because when I think back to what people could have said to me, I know I just had a lot of experiences with what not to say. And I think...
what would that be?
Okay, so my favorite
your top
is,
do not say list.
Once when I hurt myself kind of bad and was in an ambulance, and the EMTs were talking. Well, one of them said, "Why would you do that to yourself?" And then when I was in the ER, the nurse said something like, she was super fast, like trying to sew me up, and then say, well, I have, she said something about I have people with not real illnesses, but something like I have really sick people who need my help. I got to go. And I was like, oh,
ouch.
Yeah. Like, okay. And just the shame stuff. And I guess it's just not, it's always don't overreact or underreact, overreaction is more common, I think, is, don't do that. You can't do that, or saying you can't. It's like, that's the person's coping strategy. So it's kind of like when you discover your kid smoking weed or something, that it's like, okay, I wonder if someone had said to me, hey, I see you're struggling, and I see, and I wouldn't have wanted them to see the scars, but if they did, to say, I saw some cuts on you, and I just want you to know that I see you're in pain, and I want to help if I can. And
interesting. So not questioning, but just witnessing. It's like, I noticed this. Yeah, I'm wondering if you're in pain. I'm guessing you're in pain, but not, because you're right. I think the tendency would be, if it's your child or your girlfriend, to start asking why. How long are you doing this? Why do you do this? Right. When are you going to stop? Like, we have to send you. You have to go get help. Yeah. This is so screwed up. Yeah. Why?
Right.
And all, feeling like you're on trial.
Yeah. And maybe just to, it sounds weird, but to normalize and to say, we all end up finding something that we all have pain sometimes, and not to minimize their pain, but we all end up finding something that seems to get us through life. And sometimes those things end up not being great for us. And, I've got stuff too. And I think that's kind of the same thing with drinking and drugs. It's like, I want to help, but I don't want to push it, and I want you to know that I'm here and I love you, and I love you no matter what. And when you want, happy I know people can get well and can ease pain. And so I want to help you get that if I can.
It's such a bummer, Annie, isn't it? That the most powerful stuff that can make you feel better is also bad for you.
I know.
Stimulants and cocaine and vodka and cutting and like the stuff that really works, the stuff that works fast and powerfully, it's usually a big nightmare. And the stuff that works well, but over time in a healthy way, like mindfulness and running and even games on your phone, or those take much more practice and intention, and they don't work as fast. And I think that's
you don't see the benefit until you've done it enough times when it doesn't work, until it's like, oh, this actually really helped.
Yeah.
I think of if I ever wrote a book, I'd want to have it be about, like, I called it The Allure of Self-Destruction, because it's so alluring, just wanting to just have, either pain or sabotage or, just destroying ourselves. And, what is it about that that's appealing, and the many ways we do it?
I'm guessing, half our listeners right now are totally getting that, and the other half are saying, "What?
Yeah,
what is she talking? What is she talking about?"
Yeah, and but I feel like everybody kind of does it. Like, we sabotage a relationship. We have fear of success and we don't go for it, and we just do things over and over, expecting different results, and it may not be, hitting ourselves or smoking crack, or it may be that we spend too much money. It may be that we sleep all the time and don't get help, and it may be just our patterns with people that keep us from connecting in a true intimate way. And that's the thing, is we all do something, unless we're just happy all the time, which would just be weird. I assume that maybe those people exist. I don't know.
I don't think they exist.
Have never really been around one. I think they'd be really annoying. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're at Disneyland.
Something like that.
They work there. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they go home and they
do crack.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining today. This has been really wonderful to have you.
Yes, I'm happy to do it. I've never really told a story in this way, and it is a little weird because I'm a psychologist, and just being out. But I think we have to do that. We have to tell people that there's help, there's hope. Don't give up.
Yeah.
As they say in 12 Steps, don't give up before the miracle happens. And it may not be a miracle, but it's maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's
I think Annie, you have way more street cred, I believe, as a psychologist, having been through what you've been through. Again, like I said on a prior episode, it's not that you need to have pets to be a veterinarian, but it seems like it would make you a better veterinarian. And I think if you're a psychologist or therapist who hasn't been through some real darkness yourself,
go out and find some.
in the show notes, Annie and I will put the various kind of things that we recommend for
therapists who want to get better.
But that's not too lethal.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Semi-lethal stuff. Yeah. If you like this episode, please share it with anyone else who might find hope or meaning in this story. Check out our website, bftapodcast.com, where you can learn more about us and this project, get more information on the treatments mentioned in the stories, as well as additional resources and music credits. You can also email us with comments or story requests. If you have time, please rate us on iTunes, as this helps us spread these stories far and wide. Much gratitude to my good friend Chris Johnson, who does our sound, and thank you for listening to Back from the Abyss. May each of you find the strength and support to find your way through the darkness.